У нас там сосед, он пьяный, он, стучится на дверь, всю ломает нафиг. Он уже несколько минут здесь стоит, стучится, орёт, матерится. Я просто, мне страшно.
Remember the terrifying scene from The Shining?
Your house here.
Imagine this happening in real life. And imagine being a defenseless kid having to deal with this.
Папа ушел в магазин. Я не знаю, что делать, Он сначала прям долбился, будто ногой, а теперь вот долбится. Долбится, это прям слышно. Это очень жестко слышно.
This is 9-year-old Felicia Kononchuck. She was a sweet little girl who had painted a heart on her face. She loved her family and she loved her TikTok friends. In a shocking twist, she took to live TikTok for some comfort as her crazed neighbor was trying to break into her home. Felicia's TikTok followers, most of them children, watched helplessly as she was killed by 33-year-old Vasily Dunitz. It's simply horrifying, and it makes you think just how fleeting life is. Felicia Kononchuck was born in Chita City, Russia in 2011 to parents Alina and Fyodor. She grew up with Fyodor and two brothers, one 5 years older and one 5 years younger than her. Felicia didn't have a bad bone in her body. Her mother remembers she was so cheerful, bright, and never held a grudge. In many ways, Felicia was the quintessential girly girl. She loved pink, flowers, and unicorns and did very well in school. Felicia grew up in Chita, which is a pretty big city of around 350,000 people, close to the Mongolian border. And in that part of Russia, big cities are pretty scarce. Chita is far away from the other bustling towns. But Felicia felt close to the whole world through her TikTok account. Felicia didn't have millions of followers, but she had friends her age following her from all around the country. That way she felt connected to her whole generation, something she definitely couldn't do just by playing with her few schoolmates. Her family encouraged her to pursue all her passions. She was a kind and loving girl, and Fyodor never saw any danger in Felicia talking to TikTok. He was right. The danger wasn't lurking on the internet. It was right next door. On the afternoon of February 17th, 2021, Felicia was at home, but her parents weren't. She was with her two brothers and a maintenance team who was doing some work in the living room. But as she heard some terrifying noises coming from the hall of her apartment block, she decided to record herself on TikTok Live. That way, she could directly address her friends and ask for help, or at least seek some comfort.
Ребята, всем привет, у меня сейчас жесть история. У нас там сосед, он пьяный. Он, стучится на дверь, всю ломает нафиг. Он уже несколько минут здесь стоит, стучится, орёт, матерится. Я просто, мне страшно. Блин. Он вообще... Мне страшно. Я с братом младшим, старшим, и там еще ремонт делают. Папа ушел в магазин. Я не знаю, что делать, Он нам сейчас дверь сломает. Жесть просто, капец. Мне очень страшно, у меня сердце бьется, жесть. Я боюсь, у меня просто... Теперь он сначала прям долбился, будто ногой, а теперь вот долбится. Долбится, это прям слышно. Это очень жестко слышно. У меня просто башка раскалывается.
Imagine how scary this must have been for Felicia. Hearing your drunk neighbor try to break the door down is scary to anyone, let alone a 9-year-old girl. Felicia continued to record for about an hour.
Это он только что стучал, вот. Я как смогла, так записал, блин. Я боюсь, я пойду опять.
You can even hear Felicia's little brother whimpering in the background, growing more and more scared by the minute.
Скажу вам по-честному, он уже, час где-то стоит, стучится. Я уже, сердце страшно. Жестко. Это жестко. Мой брат, спрятался и все.
Sadly, this wasn't the first time Felicia's neighbor was putting her life in danger. This was 33-year-old Vasily Dunitz, who worked at a household supplies store and had a long history of drunken violence and irrational behavior. In the past, he'd had several unpleasant encounters with Felicia's dad. This time, he was annoyed at the noise made by the family's renovation team. He'd already harassed Felicia and her brothers in the morning about the noise. Fyodor had been very clear about boundaries, and he had had an argument with Vasily before he'd left to go grocery shopping. But Vasily was so angered that he waited for Fyodor to leave in order to terrorize his children some more. If Fyodor had stayed home, he wouldn't have tried to break into the apartment. Vasily banged on Felicia's door and shouted obscene insults for close to an hour, but it all seemed to dial down toward the end of her video. In fact, Felicia was almost certain he'd got bored of attacking the door. After her TikTok recordings, Felicia messaged some of her local friends, telling them about the distressing situation and asking for advice. One of her friends offered her to come to her place and take her for a walk, just until Fyodor returned home and handled the situation with Vasily, who seemed to have retreated to his apartment. So, as she thought Vasily got bored of trying to break in, Felicia quietly waited for her dad to come home and for her friend to knock on her door so that they could go walk in the local park. Minutes before Fyodor got home, Felicia heard a knock. She thought it must be her friend. She eagerly went to open the door, but when she did, her blood froze. It was none other than Vasily. This time, he was armed with a hunting rifle. Frantic, Felicia closed the door, but Vasily fired through the door, making perfect holes in it. The bullets reached Felicia's head. She lived just long enough to see her dad one last time. This is the horrible scene that Felicia's father found when he got home. He remembered, I ran into the corridor and saw my daughter covered in blood. She croaked, Dad, I've been killed. I took her in my arms and shouted to my son and the repair workers to call an ambulance. Fyodor's oldest son called the emergency services as fast as he could, but they were 1 minute too late. My daughter died in my arms. When the ambulance arrived, I carried her to them, but the doctors said that she had no chance to survive. Felicia had been shot in the head with a 12 caliber hunting rifle. It was a miracle she lived long enough to say goodbye to her father. Vasily Dunitz was arrested on the spot. He didn't even attempt to flee his apartment after killing Felicia. The question remains, why didn't the maintenance workers try to convince Vasily to back off? He pounded at Felicia's door for close to an hour, cursing and trying to bring the door down. Did the workers really not take his threats seriously? Or were they too afraid to confront him, worried that he had a gun? In the end, he really did have a gun, and poor Felicia stood right in its way. But with the maintenance workers in the apartment and Felicia recording 2 TikTok videos discussing at length her fears, the case was truly heartbreaking. It seems like there were many opportunities to avoid this, yet no one realized the actual danger and called the police before it was too late. Following Felicia's heartbreaking death, her father went on TikTok posting his daughter's final 2 videos in March 2021, then posting a video of the crime scene and another one from his home, crying over the loss of his only daughter. Indeed, it made no sense to go through what he did. It was downright shocking and impossible to forgive or forget. Did Vasily really feel warranted in harassing children over a noise complaint? How could killing a child make up for a few hours of maintenance noise? Being drunk is not an excuse. Vasily was a violent, real-life monster, and his alcoholism just emphasized his horrible behavior. Fyodor's last TikTok video showed Vasily behind bars, waiting for his trial. People commented sharing their sympathy for Fyodor. Others complained that Fyodor wouldn't get a life sentence as the usual sentence for murder in Russia is just 10 years. Fyodor posted one last video showing him and his 4-year-old son at Felicia's funeral. Eventually, Vasily Dunets was sentenced to 17 years in a strict regime penal colony in Siberia. It's harrowing to think that he'll be released at the age of 50. Will prison correct his behavior, or will he become even more violent and desensitized to crime by the time he gets out? At the moment, Fyodor is trying to appeal Vasily's sentence and demand a longer prison term. He commented, "He deserves at least 20 years. I just want that man to realize what he did." Sadly, this wasn't the first time a child lost her life minutes after recording a scary TikTok video. Just 2 months before Felicia fell victim to her sociopathic neighbor, 16-year-old